A very good afternoon to everybody and welcome to the info session for Decent Rural Living Initiative Designathon. I'm Adam Lyle, co-founder of Padang & Co. Padang is very pleased to be supporting this very important initiative and look forward to sharing more about the Designathon shortly. Today's agenda is pretty packed. We want to give you as much information as we can to help you all participate in this Designathon. We'll go through a welcome, then I'll come back and give you more information about the ins and outs of the Designathon. And then most importantly, we'll be diving in, providing you some context around the challenges and sharing some research. We know many of you on the call may not be familiar with the life on the plantation and the challenges that the workers face. So we want to give you as much context to help you as you think about what designs you may create. And then we'll follow on and wrap up with a panel. But now I'd like to introduce Caroline Lim, Senior Manager, Corporate Communications for Musimas to give a welcome address on behalf of Drilly. Over to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Adam, for the introduction. A very good morning or afternoon to everyone here, wherever you are. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Caroline Lim, and I'm the Senior Manager of Corporate Communications at Musimas Group. Musimas is one of the largest integrated palm oil companies in the world. Now, in 2018, 5 leading palm oil companies, Cargill, Golden Agri Resources, Musimas, Sime Darby Plantations, and Wilmar, agreed to collectively address systemic labor challenges within the Indonesian palm oil sector. The Decent Rural Living Initiative, otherwise known as DRLI, was set up as a pre-competitive collaboration to address these issues. The palm sector is key to the Indonesian economy, employing over 5.7 million people across the country. However, many workers within the supply chain still experience precarious employment, as well as poor living conditions, as what critics of the palm oil sector often say. So leading companies have taken significant steps to adopt occupational health and safety measures, as well as provide health and educational services to many of the workers who will be employed and the local communities who live in and around our plantations. However, the challenges affecting our industry are systemic and cannot be effectively addressed in silos. So there are limitations to one company, and hence, the 5 anchor partners came together with a common resolve to tackle human rights and labor issues across the sector, which will hopefully ensure the long-term sustainability of the palm oil industry. Now, in the initial days, we went through a series of strategic conversations to identify areas where the anchor partners are well positioned to accelerate solutions through pre-competitive collaboration. From these conversations, we have identified 6 focus areas which further develop into the current 3 pilot projects, one of which is today's Designathon challenge. So why the Designathon? We want to create a safe working environment for all who are in the fields. The DRLI allows us to come together to look for solutions for the areas where we operate and where our supply chain is. So we ask ourselves, how can we improve workers' health and safety through design for personal protective equipment, or PPE? How can we improve compliance among the workers and make PPE more comfortable for them too? Now, mass-produced PPE is often unsuitable for use in the tropics. It might be because of the hot and humid weather, or because the PPE is too thick and too heavy, or it doesn't fit very well. Hence, workers are reluctant to use the PPE properly or correctly, which might increase the risk of workplace accidents or injuries. So DRII anchor partners team up with Pada & Co. to explore innovative ways to tackle 3 key PPE challenges and find solutions for them. First, to make PPE more comfortable in the tropics. Secondly, to get the workers to comply to PPE safety standards. And finally, reduce costs and improve the quality of PPE. So these Designathons are a creative approach to reach a regional audience. It is an opportunity for design professionals, engineers, students, or innovators to explore the challenge with support from the industry stakeholders, partners, and experts to exchange learnings and solutions. And we can be a little bit inward-looking as an industry. We are hoping to get a fresh set of perspectives. We also hope that through this, there will be insightful takeaways for the betterment of workers within the palm oil supply chain. Thank you again for joining us today. Adam will continue to share more details about the Designathon. Thank you, and Adam, please.
Thank you, Caroline, for your address. So now I'll go into a little bit more about the program. So as first, what is a Designathon? Perhaps some of you are not too sure what it actually is. Just to help a little bit, it's design plus a hackathon. Now, some of you may not even be too familiar with a hackathon, but in a sense, a hackathon is, you might get the idea, hacking out an idea. Designathon is hacking out a great design. And as you just heard Caroline talking about the challenges for the workers, we're wanting you to think differently. And as she said, sometimes in the industry, we might be inward looking. So we're really excited to attract many of you to this particular challenge, to think differently about how we might find solutions for the workers' PPE. So, and it can embrace many different areas. But and I'll get into the challenges a little bit more detail, but what's really important here is the timeline. Here we are today on the 25th of August. Set your calendars, get ready to make your applications by the 13th of September. So that's just a little under 3 weeks, plenty of time to get your first application in, and I'll go into what's required in the application. Don't worry, there's not a lot of detail that's required by the 13th of September. And then the week of the 20th of September, we'll do a short list of those that will then actually go on to the formal Designathon, which begins on the 20th of, I've just been told I've been in darkness there, but now the light has been restored and here I am. I'm sorry. So the Designathon will be the week of the 20th of September. So Caroline gave us an insight to the particular challenge statements. I'm not going to read each of these because you as readers can read faster than I can speak. Plus, these challenge statements and the context around them are all on the website, which I'll give you that address at the end of the presentation, so you can go in there and get all the detail. But each of these challenge statements are slightly different. They're all involving equipment, and so you might see safety eyewear in either this particular challenge statement or the one to follow, or likewise boots, but there's different needs. So please read the challenge statements carefully to understand whether you're looking at the challenge statement for harvesters or whether you're looking at the challenge statement in relation to sprayers. As you'll see that boots will appear in both places, as will eyewear and gloves. There's obviously different needs and requirements for each of these workers, and so the equipment can be different. And this is actually a part of the issue that we face, in that sometimes there's one piece of equipment that's produced for all applications. What we're trying to do is to zoom in and see, okay, what might be better for this particular application? So, and then the final challenge statement is actually another one that's also looking away at physical strain when carrying fertilizers. As I said, all these challenge statements are in full detail on the website. So that's where you'll get all the information. Now, what actually is required by the 13th of September? It's a fairly simple applications, as you'll see on the website. First of all, we want to know, are you applying as an individual or as a team? If it's a team, we want to know who your pals are and introduce your team. Then, in your particular proposal at this stage, just pick which challenge statement you're submitting against, and then describe your proposed solution. And of course, provide diagrams that sort of brings it to life, list some of the key features of the solution, and also express what you think is unique about your idea. Now, at this point, this is your submission of an idea. This is not your fully fledged idea, but I'd encourage you to give as much detail as you're able at this time, because that will help the judges review your submission, and then in the evaluation period, move you forward to the Designathon. And then finally, are you looking to add team members? And for instance, absolutely, if you don't have a team at this stage, you're not sure, please put your name down and say, hey, can you help us find some team members? That's what we'll do. What sort of skill sets are you looking? You might be a business side of the house. You're looking for a designer, or you're a designer and you want somebody that understands materials. Be as specific as you like, and we will do our utmost to connect you to the right types of people who can help you. And they don't have to be in your city or around the world. Obviously, this is all being conducted virtually. So we'll be able to connect you with people from around the world to assist you in your application. So yes, there is evaluation criteria. And so as you can see, there's 3 elements. How innovative is it? Is it feasible? What are the credentials of the team? And they're weighted accordingly. 40% towards innovativeness. Of course, we want something that is new and different, but at the same time, it's important that we're not just thinking crazy ideas without any sense of feasibility. So there has to be that right balance between being innovative and feasible. And credentials are important for us to understand, listen, would you be able to take this through to the next stage? So fairly straightforward. And now the other key dates. Now, if you are selected to go into the actual Designathon phase, these are the key steps and what's happening at each step of the way. So on the 25th of September, we actually have the Designathon, where there'll be more context sharing. We'll have subject matter experts to act as mentors, to answer questions, give you guidance, and there'll be a co-creation workshop, which will be conducted by SC, who you'll be meeting a little later in this webinar. Following that particular design day, myself and colleagues will be checking in with each of the selected teams on a one-on-one basis on the 29th and 30th of September to see how we can help you. Are there things that you're not sure about? What can we do? What other resources can we marshal to help you be the best that you can? Then on the 2nd of October, we'll be running a pitch coaching clinic. And again, this is one-on-one, where myself and colleagues will work with you to help you polish your particular pitch, so that on the 4th of October, the pitch day, again, you'll be able to get your message, your design across in the best way possible. So we're all about giving you as much support as we can, bringing in the right resources to give you the best chance to make your design shine. And then on the pitch day, you'll be pitching to the judging panel. You'll have a 3-minute pitch and 2 minutes Q&A. Now, what are we all here for? Yes, well, we're here, I hope, for many reasons. One, because we think this is a great opportunity to help the plantation workers to make their living and working conditions even better by providing them better PPE. Secondly, there is an opportunity to win cash prizes, $3,000 for first prize, $2,000 for second prize, $1,000 for third prize, all in US dollars, plus the shortlisted team. So even if you're not the final winner, shortlisted teams will be given US $100 to help them build out their prototypes during the Designathon. And to me, the biggest prize, of course, is coming up with a design that can help the plantation workers. But in reality, what we're all hoping for, that somebody is going to, or a couple may come up with designs that we can actually get into production. So we want designs, but we want designs that feasible. And the real win will be when we can come up with a design that can make a real difference and can go into production. Now, that's enough about the actual Designathon itself. All the details are there on the website. But now, very importantly, I'd like to introduce Dr. Astrid Sulistomo, head of PEDOCI, Occupational Medicine Association, to start with our context sharing. Dr. Astrid, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. I think I will start with sharing my screen.
It's coming up.
So thank you for DRLI for inviting me. I think this is a very important occasion, especially for the plantation workers. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. You're at the end. If you press forward, I think it should bring you back to the beginning of your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So all the participants, good afternoon, and thank you, DRLI, again for inviting me. I will talk a little about occupational safety and health in the palm oil industry in Indonesia. I got the information from the literature as well as from my colleagues who are working actually in the clinics of the plantation. So they have some experience about the occupational safety and health. This is just my biodata. So as already mentioned, palm production is very important to the economy of Indonesia because it's the world's biggest producer and also consumer of the community, and also providing about half of the world's supply. And yeah, in 2010, the World Bank highlighted that the occupational safety and health of palm oil industry workers was a challenge for the future sustainability of the industry because many get injured, many got sick by working there. Yeah, particularly the harvesting of the palm fruit is very labor intensive. Yeah, and there is no mechanization yet in Indonesia, Malaysian, or in the Nigerian industry. So that is very hard working for the workers there. So many got ill and injured. And we know we have more than 4 or 5 million workers now who are working in that kind of plantation. Yeah, and millions of workers are involved. Actually, there is a lack of information of their occupational health and safety. So there is little study done. There was a systematic review with so many studies, but only one about Indonesia. So because, yeah, they are maybe located in remote area and the workers are changing, yeah, and migrating, so very difficult to follow up. So what then are the tasks of the workers? The main task is, of course, the harvesting. And this is several times a year. And depending on the trees, the palm trees, it can be closer to the ground. Then the worker uses a chisel to cut and push the fruit to the ground. And for tallow trees, they use a chisel that is attached to a long pole, yeah, which make the worker have to work in an awkward position. They have to look upwards, yeah, and really handle the long pole very carefully. The weight of each fruit is about 10 to 50 kilograms, yeah, which is a lot actually. And then, of course, the fresh fruit bunch has to be collected and transported to the processing area. Usually is using a tractor or small trucks because the streets or between the palm trees is not very wide, so they have to use small vehicles. And for that, the fresh fruit branch is pierced with a metal hook and swing to the truck, which is also heavy work for the workers. And the third one is the loose fruit. Yeah, the loose fruit has to be collected because this is the small fruits that got loose from the bunch. Yeah, because they're still small. And if you are not collecting this, then there will be growing new trees, which will affect the old trees, yeah. And that's why they have to be collected. Yes. In Indonesia, many is still manually. They use a rake and then a wheelbarrow to transport the loose fruit to this dumping site. Some have already some tools for that, yeah, but it's not very common yet. And then after the fresh fruit plant is removed, then they have to remove also the stalk and the front cutter, because if not, then the new fruit will not grow. And that is similar than when you do the harvesting, yeah. It's with a chisel and a sickle. And then after that, we have to spread fertilizer, which is also done manually. The fertilizer is distributing using a lorry, but then each worker has to carry the fertilizer in a bag on his shoulder, which is can be about 50 kilograms also. And then the other worker is spreading the fertilizer to the ground by hand, yeah. And many of them are women, yeah. They are just a company where all the fertilizer spreader are women, but in another there are men. So there is a different in each company. And then the last is the weeding and pesticide, the pest control. And usually they use the backpack, yeah, to spray the pesticides. So that is then the kind of workers that the workers have to do in this plantation. And as you can see, there is a lot of potential danger to their health and for their safety. And the characteristic of the workers who are working there, it can be male and female, usually with low educational background. And often migrant workers come from other parts of the country, or in Malaysia, they even come from Indonesia or from the Philippines. So they're not actually people who are coming from that side, and they are not full-time employees, only contracted for a certain time. So they keep moving. Yeah, and then sometimes also they are recruited by a group leader. It's not by the company itself, but it's the task of a group leader to look for their own workers. And so they recruit the other workers, and that is then not directly by the company. This causes also a problem. So the occupational hazards from this kind of work, as you can see, there is the physical hazard, yeah, which is heat, yeah, the heat and humidity, and also the ultraviolet rays, yeah, from the sun, yeah, because they work outside, and also the noise from all the lorries, from all the vehicles that is going around in that plantation, and also vibration, yeah, from all the heavy equipment, yeah. So this can all cause health problems. And of course, there's the chemical hazards, which are the fertilizers and the pesticides that are used, which can cause many health problems, as we can see later. And the biological hazard, yeah, because it's in an open field, it's in the outside, there is a lot of biological hazard like mosquitoes, cause malaria, rats, and can cause leptospirosis, snakes, and other animals. And also the palm tree itself can cause injuries, yeah, because they have thorns and other sharp edges. Yeah, so this is then the hazards that can affect the worker. And of course, there is a lot of ergonomic hazards because they have to work in awkward position. They have to do all by hand and heavy lifting, do repetitive motion, yeah, with the hands, and also the long working hours. And psychosocial hazards is also often can cause mental health problem, yeah, because they receive low wages, yeah, compared to the heavy work. No security, I mean, it's no security for their work, that they will be employed for a long time, or even there can be also abuse, yeah, by others, for the females and so. And poor living condition, usually because it's near the plantation with very minimal facilities, yeah, and also isolation from their families, maybe, or from the society. Because of these hazards that they experience, so these are the potential health problems, and actually already happened. The most common health problem, according to the doctor who are working there at the site, yeah, is first is musculoskeletal disorders. There is a lot of low back pain, shoulder pain, neck pain, yeah, because they have to work in upward position, and of course skin disorders because contact with all the chemicals, yeah. So here in the picture is not very clear, yeah. The upper photo is the picture of the bag of a worker, yeah, because they are using backpack to spray the pesticides, and it's usually leaking, yeah, so it can go to the back, yeah, and also to the hands, yeah, and some even the leaking is so much that it got to the genital area, and it causes skin rash and skin infection, and yeah, a lot of so they cannot work, yeah, because it's very much in pain. And of course infectious diseases, they have malaria, leptospirosis, and then mental disorders, yeah, anxiety, depression, and also respiratory disorders because they inhale the pesticides also during their spraying. That is the most common health problems that the doctors there experience from their patient. And besides, of course, is the work injury. Yeah, work injuries are very high prevalent there, and sometimes are also really severe injuries. Yeah, the most common are stuck by the thorns there because there's so lot of thorns from the trees, hit by chisel or other sharp equipment, hit by fallen objects from the palm tree, maybe the palm leaf, which is very heavy and it can come to your head, and then vehicle accidents that occur there because a lot of vehicles are going back and through. And yeah, as you can see from the work procedure that they have to do, they should use personal protective equipment, yeah, as already mentioned before, which is about this, yeah, actually. I don't mention the ideal one or the complete, but what is usually provided for the workers according to the experience of our doctors there. So for the harvester, they usually only got a helmet, boots, and a mask, yeah, from cloth. Yeah, but if you see that they have to look upwards to cut the fresh fruit, then of course their eyes, yeah, are not protected, yeah, and also they can get what it's from the thorns and so, yeah, what can fallen, yeah, this is not they are not protected by that. You can see from the picture before that they only use the long the chisel, and then helmet and boots, yeah. Sometimes the mask even they don't use. And the pesticide sprayer, they got an apron, as you saw in the picture before, which is without the sleeves, and then mask, which is from cloth, actually, it's not a respirator mask, and goggles or protective eyewear, and gloves. Gloves is usually from wool or from cloth, yeah, it's not, it can still leak the chemicals, and also boots, yeah. And also the fertilizer spreader, they only got gloves, mask, and boots. So even though there are some protective PPE provided, yeah, but the problem is with the PPE, not all workers wear it because it's not fit. Yeah, because there are women workers, there are male and female workers, and usually they provide one PPE for all, yeah, one size, yeah. So many they feel it's not comfortable, it's too heavy or too hot to use it. Yeah, so they're not all worn, and sometimes also they're only provided PPE once when they are accepted, and then they don't get any other new PPE, even though it's already damaged and not working. The PPE is not replaced sometimes. And in some companies, the PPE is provided through the group leader. So it's not directly by the company. So it depends on the group leader what type of PPE is provided and when it is provided. And of course, the group leader wants to maybe be more efficient, yeah, than thinking of the health and safety of the workers. So this is a short introduction. So occupational safety and health is mandatory for all workers in Indonesia. But yeah, it's very difficult to monitor the occupational safety and health program in the palm oil plantation because it's very remote area. The worker population kept changing. Information exists that work accidents and diseases are prevalent, are very high. Yeah, but implementation, it means that implementation of worker safety is still low and it needs to be improved. And I'm very glad if this is an opportunity to get maybe better PPE for these workers. I think that's all for me as a short introduction. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Astrid. It was incredibly comprehensive. It may have been short in your mind, but you covered a lot of ground there and gave a lot of information to our aspiring designers on the call. At this point, I'd also like to pay tribute to our lead sponsors, Cargill and PepsiCo. If it wasn't for their great sponsorship, this initiative would not be possible. So a big thank you to Cargill and PepsiCo. And now we're going to hear from Cargill, from Muhammad Faisal Shamsuddin, EHS Director for Cargill in Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand. Over to you, Faisal.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Just let me know if you're able to see it.
Looking good. If you just go on to, yep, great.
Okay, thank you.
And if anyone has any questions, we won't be taking live questions, but please use the Q&A box and we'll answer those questions during the course of this webinar, or if we can't get to you during the webinar, we'll get back to you. So remember, use the Q&A, not the chat. Use the Q&A if you have any questions. Over to you, Faisal.
All right, thank you, Adam. And first of all, thank you, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Faisal, and as you can see, there's two names here because I was working with a peer from Wilma and trying to build up what we're going to share, or what I'm going to share soon. And as well, I think Dr. Astrid gave a very good overview of some of the challenges and what we're seeing in palm plantation. And myself and Lee we'll also attempt to share from the industry perspective what we're seeing or some of the challenges that we're facing, which would help guide all of you during the design phases later on, hopefully. Okay, moving forward, just a little bit, this is just a plantation in a glimpse. I think the one that Dr. Astrid shared is not giving the whole picture. It's actually a very dynamic. As part of Cargill, for example, Cargill, in Indonesia, in Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, at least my scope, around 60% of the portfolio is around palm plantation, so it's quite significant. Even so, as you can see, it's a very dynamic setup which has a lot of different components. And of course, today we're going to zoom in on activities which were touched earlier that are mainly being done manually today in the industry around fertilizing or manuring. Upkeep operation using chemical as well. The main item is around harvesting. But just to give another challenge probably later on that you would also realize is the breadth of the exposure around the need to use PPE with regards to the manual operations of palm plantations today. Just to give a perspective, for Cargill's portfolio on palm plantation, if we are to run it as a country, because we do run everything, housing, community, we employ doctors, we have schools, and that's common in palm plantation, which is particularly unique to itself. But having said, if we're our country, will be 183rd rank on top of Singapore and Tonga and Bahrain. And we're one of the smaller players with only 100,000 hectares. Others like Zamdabi or Wilmar are well into the million hectare reach, and there's a lot more challenges there. Now, when we talk about implementing the risk control, as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, it's a bit unique in the palm plantation because the products are all designed by nature. The trees, you know, they grow by themselves. They might get crooked. It's all it's all at the expense of the how nature intend for the design of the work, and then for the industry to try and adapt to that. Hence why it's quite challenging to manage it this way. However, what we're seeing on the right here is just a basic of reflection on hierarchy of control, where the best way to manage risks are always to remove or eliminate the risk or work at the source of the risk or source of the hazard. If not, it works on to managing the processes. And last but not least, then we want to resort into protecting the workers because we're not able to take away those risks from the workplaces. And as mentioned earlier, due to the uniqueness of palm plantation, a lot of the controls today around risk are resorting to administrative and also use of PPE. Hence, why the design, the applicability, the effectiveness of those PPE to protect workers from the risks are critical for the palm plantation industry. Now, I'm only going to brief through the next couple of slides because I think Dr. Astrid covered this quite well, and we're going to have other slides later on to look into this. But these are just some of the typical risks that are present in the palm plantation operations, especially around these three work categories: the harvesting, the manuring or fertilizing, as well as the sprayer, which we're using chemical for upkeep operations. So of course, as you can see how they fit in, gravitational falling, people falling off out in the field, you can expect to have you know, level ground. It's not going to be level ground. Chemical, again, involving sprayer and manure exposure towards the chemical they are using for the upkeep. These are typically herbicides, pesticides, right? As well as the fertilizers. Human, of course, manual handling, positioning, a lot of manual work when it comes to palm plantation and how do we manage those risks. Electrical, we do have power lines in between some of the trees at certain locations. So for the harvesters, it's a fatality credible exposure with regards to these electrical power lines. Impact pressure is probably one of the more common that we see around harvesters. We're getting hit by falling fruits or the fronds that they were cutting, and probably take a lot of the injury portfolios that we have in the palm industry. Similarly, working with sharp tools, using sickle, using chisel, there's also a lot of laceration and penetrative injuries being recorded within the palm business. Biological is expected to a certain point, having need to operate out in the natural elements. Snake bites, animal attacks. We've got bears, orangutan, you name it. It's all out there. And how do we, manage the exposure from there? And of course, again, the weather changes, flooding, all this adds on to the risk exposure to these three particular work groups. So going just going through, zoom in on this tree. What we're seeing here, photo of the harvester holding a chisel. This is typically being used for short palm. The ones in Dr Astrid slides was holding a sickle where they use it for taller palm. But as you can see, those are indications of some of the typical PPE being used across the industry. Today, of course, helmets, shoes, eye protection, face protection, and gloves are typical ones. But you know, considering the risk discussions that we've had earlier, it's not necessarily just limited to this around the Designathon, right? It could be if it's to manage other risks, exposure that you get to learn, you know, throughout this journey later on, involving risk, exposure to the harvesters. And of course, like we said, open field, not level ground. The harvesters also, it's a very highly manual work, handling, if you could imagine, 10 to 50 kilograms of fruits that needs to be hauled, to be transferred. And then they will also need to walk up to even 2-3 hectares per day. Just to give an indication, 1 hectare, 300 meter times 1,000 meter. So walking through 3 blocks a day after doing all those heavy work will also impact on, you know, their ability to maintain some of those administrative controls as well as PPE. Similarly for the sprayers as well, of course, they are more catered towards the exposure that they have, which are the chemicals, the pesticides and the herbicides, but other than that, it's also similar exposure like what the harvester are facing, natural elements, unleveled floor, animal, biological, snakes, so on and so forth. But those are typically, you see the ones circled red are the one typically being used across the industry. Of course, respirators, safety shoes, respirators, full chemical suit, face protection, as well as gloves. And now I'll move on to the last one, which is around the manuring or the fertilizing, which are done manually. Of course, there are some parts of the business of the industry that has moved into mechanization, but there's still a large a number of fertilizing activities being done manually. I actually had some video, but I think we're gonna park that to a space or a platform where everyone could have a look to give better understanding on how the daily operation works. But as you can see, they'll be required to be carrying the load of the fertilizers themselves. That's up to 25 kilogram, probably more. Hauling that, they were settling that using many ways to settle that. For this particular one, they're using the type of cloth to settle it, and then walking around with all the PPE, just spreading the fertilizers around the trees. And again, similar exposure, similar challenges around you know, the exertion that's coming from the work themselves. Probably just to touch a little bit more around the challenges from the industry's perspective when it comes to PPE. Of course, we've talked about working condition. Typically in Indonesia, Malaysia, it's a tropical country, it's very hot, very humid. So PPEs are not typically designed for those type of weather or climate. So it's always a challenge. To enable workers to sustain using this PPE, the availability of those products as well, and how well are they performing, and the durability of those towards the risk. And of course, legacy work practices. There's a lot of work practices that might introduce certain risks. I mean, some of you might be EHS professionals. If you have a 50 kilogram load on top of a 10-meter tree, you probably won't be poking it down, right, to harvest. However, that's how it is, and you know, there's many ways, and that's probably the most efficient way but not necessarily the safest way for now. Hence why we're resorting to a lot of protections and other stuff to manage the risk. Resources, high volume industry, as mentioned, the population of workers, including also the dependents that stay within the housing, when something is deployed, it's always it's a huge magnitude. So change is also not that easy to make. So these are just some of the challenges. It's a high volume industry. Cost and budget is always being looked into due to the variable or fluctuating margin profit margins. So PPE as well, or any other requirements around safety has always been looked at or being questions around the need to spend. Is part of the consideration as well. The programs that are required to ensure the accommodating programs that are required to ensure the safe use of those PPE, the fit testing, the medical surveillance around the exposure, so on and so forth, as well as the culture and culture, just general culture within the industry. Of course, the maturity is still low towards appreciation towards health and safety in comparison to other more advanced industries. The last one is the most critical part is around the individual, because when we talk about PPE, it always comes down to the person who's going to wear it. And these are always the things that hover around when we do intervene people not using their PPEs, right? The comfort versus the protection, whether they have the right understanding, whether it's comfortable enough, whether it's fit for purpose. Sometimes it's overdone, sometimes it's not being done enough for the particular risk, and how practical it is for the work. As you guys, as all of you might have understood, it's a highly manual work, highly motorized skill required, movement on the whole body, and how the use of this PPE might be impacting their capability to produce. There's also very high risk tolerance, which relates back to the culture around excuses of not using those protection. And of course, the designs that's available today, how well they are fitted for the industry, fitted for the climate, fitted for the features of the people or the demography that we have working in the industry, is also part of all the challenges. And I'm on to my last slide, and I think Adam touched this briefly as well, and it's going to be clarified more forward. But these are some of the consideration that's should be looked into when trying to come up or design your solutions. Proper fit, of course. How does that fit? Does it still allow free motion? Does it impacts on dexterity, the ability to touch and grabs, and all those sort of thing? Weight, lightweight, but having the right durability to still manage the risk is important, because the demand from the work itself is already high. Partner that with heavy PPE is always, it has always presented its contradictions. Comfort level, of course, the more comfort, the more likely for them to continue using them. Design, we touch a bit on that. And then, of course, identifying hazard, workplace hazard, whether those PPEs being used today or that will be proposed. How relevant is that to the exposure to the risk today on the ground? And with that, I'm probably in my last slide. Thank you. I'll pass the floor back to Adam. Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Thank you very much, Faisal. I think the Cargill perspective has given a great compliment to Dr. Astrid's presentation, and is, I think, helping everybody in the audience. One question that's sort of come through for you is, looking at the particular opportunities, do you see greater opportunity for improvement from, say, a role-like solution, whether say we're looking at harvesters versus sprayers versus manurers, or would you take a look at a particular piece of PPE, whether it was boots or gloves, that goes across those three different job types?
Well, I would really, let it open, right? Let it open because one of the points that we do want to look into is the fit for purpose, because an eye protection for a harvester might not necessarily be the same design as as the other group, right? And also considering the exposure. So yeah, to your point, I think it's all on the table, Adam.
Right. Okay. That's terrific. And yes, Faisal's videos will be uploaded to the website as well, along with all the other resources that are coming through. Now, let me just see if I think there is another question for Faisal. Okay, let me just take this on board. A question on the design for the PPE. Dr. Astrid mentioned that some of the issues faced by the workers in utilizing their PPE were not always designed for all relevant demographics, such as women. Are designing unisex PPEs the industry standard, or is there a consideration for more differentiated products? How would you respond to that? I think we kind of know the answer, but I'll let you respond, Faisal.
Yeah. I mean, my quick response is yes, of course, because that will impact on for them to be comfortable using them and wanting to use it continuously, right? Because that's the purpose that we one of the purpose that we want to try get as well. Yeah.
Terrific. Okay. I think that's all the questions we have for you just at the moment, Faisal. So again, thanks for your great sharing. And now we're moving on to some research that CropLife Asia is going to share with us. And doing that great job is Cindy Lim, who's head of sustainable, head of sustainable and responsible business for Syngenta. So I invite you to the stage, Cindy. Please share the research. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Adam, and a very good afternoon to everybody here. May I share the screen, please? Thank you. Just please let me know when you can see the presentation.
All good.
All right, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Cindy. I come from Syngenta, but today I'm representing CropLife Asia. And in this session, really, we're just going to deep dive a little bit into sort of one category of users that's been spoken about this afternoon, and that's really the sprayers. So we're going to be talking a bit about PPE for safe use of crop protection. Well, a lot of the points were actually already covered by the great presentations you heard earlier today, but I'm hoping that, we'll still be able to provide a little bit more detail into each of these elements. So let's get into it. If my screen would move. 1 minute. Okay, here we go. So just to kick off a little bit with who CropLife Asia is, because I think some of you may not be familiar with who we are. We're a coalition of companies, research-based companies, essentially, that you see represented by the logos here. Most of us are crop protection and seeds companies. And the purpose of CropLife Asia is a industry platform where all of the companies can work together and develop solutions for shared challenges. And safe use is clearly one of them, safe use of our chemicals in the field. And so the CropLife Asia's stewardship team focuses on all areas of safe use that you see on this slide here through the entire life cycle. And the key topic of today, PPE, has been a topic that's been long discussed within the industry, and we've been looking at this this challenge in many different ways, and some of the insights we hope to share with you today, and also at the same time, we're very excited to see what new innovations will come out of this process, because it will clearly impact many smallholder farmers as well in the rest of Asia. So let's get to the topic at hand. First of all, just to give a bit more details into what is the user journey of crop protection laborer, for example. I mean, of course, it clearly depends on, the crop that we're talking about. It clearly depends on the different application technology that's available on each operation. But the general flow is pretty similar. It starts with a setup, and that's where the PPE already is required. This is where the workers would already come into contact with concentrate chemicals. And then, and also the spray equipment, then that gets brought to, the location where they need to spray, and the chemicals are then mixed with water, usually. And these concentrates can be in the form of liquids. Sometimes it's also in the form of granules and maybe even powders, depending on what is required on the plantation. And after the mixing is done, it then gets loaded into the knapsack sprayer. And knapsack sprayers can be motorized, they can be handheld, but essentially they're pretty heavy. It would be usually about 20-25 liters that they're carrying on their back before they go into the fields for spraying. And after spraying, then it's the cleaning process of everything, including the sprayer and the PPE. And of course, at the end of it is disposal. But we won't be talking about that today, but PPE is required. Some form of protection is required through all of these processes that you see here for a sprayer. So the common PPE elements that are recommended are the ones that you see on the screen here, and overalls, the coveralls that are the brown suits here, face shields, goggles, masks, gloves, as well as some form of a covered protection for the feet. But what's important is to note that the label instructions on any of the chemicals that are used would give the clear recommendation on what PPE items will be required for safe use of that particular chemical. So the next couple of slides, we're just going to highlight some details of the important elements. So we'll kick off with, first of all, the overalls. The coveralls essentially, need to protect skin from splashes, especially during the mixing and loading part of that procedure, and of course during the spraying of pesticides. The other protection target, you could say, is the back as well as the arms, especially from leaky knapsacks. Sometimes that happens, and it goes right down the back. So the water repellent nature of that coveralls is very important. However, with modern technology, a lot of the modern chemicals actually do allow everyday clothes, so long sleeve shirts, long trousers, as you saw in some of the photos that were shown in the presentation earlier, as PPE. However, if that's chosen, then an apron, which is what you would see in this diagram here. A water repellent apron is then recommended to prevent any of the exposure and leakages to the skin. Now, whatever is chosen, it's important that there's at least about 2 layers that's recommended. And the outer layer, which is the work layer and the one that's exposed to the chemicals, should then, of course, never be used for any other purposes. However, if it's an actual overall or coverall that's been chosen, then this usually comes in either a full piece, which is what you see here, or it can be in 2 pieces, which is like usually a jacket and pants. But the important elements is that the design has to be fitted closely around the neck and especially around the wrist, particularly if the sprayer has to spray up into the trees, and there should be no other openings and especially no pockets ideally, so that there won't be a buildup of chemicals anywhere. And the material that's used, that's usually woven knitted material, so cotton polyester mix coated with kind of a water repellent polymer. That's kind of the most common PPE that we've seen being made available in the market. However, there's clearly different standards and different types of materials that are also available. And I will include a link at the end of this presentation for anyone who's interested to really dig deep into the ISO standards that are available and the different types of materials that have been recommended. Now, the other piece that's really important for sprayers is then the gloves, because hands are really responsible for almost 60 to 80% of contact with chemicals. And the most important area, or the area that we see as highest risk, is during the mixing and loading time, because that's when sprayers are coming into contact with concentrate material, And so, chemical resistant gloves are the recommended material here. You would see all the materials that are listed there, but the most commonly found gloves are usually the nitrile rubber gloves. We also recommend neoprene rubber as well for use. And ideally, we wouldn't recommend any cotton or fabric gloves for sprayers unless it's specified on the label that it's safe to use. But otherwise, these are materials that are not recommended for gloves. And then, moving on to sort of the face shield, that's important for preventing splashes against the face. But at the same time, respiratory equipment, if the operation requires dealing with vapors or gases or very fine droplets, such as a fumigation exercise, then that's where, respirators are usually required in this operation. But I would say, if we have to call out two very important pieces for sprayers, we would recommend looking at obviously the overall coveralls and the gloves in particular. So if we look into sort of, if we finish with hardware and look into the softer side of things, so why are people actually using the PPE? What are the common barriers? I think this repeats a little bit what Dr. Astrid and Faisal were talking about earlier. It is clearly not comfortable. It is very hot, but at the same time, users tend to find that it's inconvenient, particularly when a user has sort of, gone into an overprotection mode using very high level PPE. That's when they find that sometimes, they have difficulty walking around, difficulty actually, even bending down and lifting up knapsacks as well. So sometimes they find that it's really inconvenient. At the same time, users don't see all the items as very necessary. So, if we follow a typical user through the entire user journey all the way through the end, some of the elements that they find not necessary during the mixing and loading piece, very usually they leave out the eye and hand protection. During the spraying, when we follow these users through the journey, they leave out the mask and the hand protection, but it is necessary actually during this period of time. The last reason that users don't use the full PPE is that sometimes they see it as being complicated because there are different types of elements that are required at different parts of this journey. And so sometimes, users find it difficult that I have to use eye protection here, but maybe not further along in the process. So keeping all of that in mind, we then worked. CropLife Asia then decided, we wanted to understand a little bit more behind the behaviors of farmers. And what we then did was to work with Ideas 42, who are a group of behavioral scientists. And of course, this research was done with smallholder farmers. And so, not all the points are relevant to the context that we are discussing here. But, in interest of time, I'll just pick up one or two elements that, we could consider in this context. The first piece is around faulty mental models around PPE components and use. So what that means essentially, mental models is that your experience typically shapes your perception of what elements can protect you and what elements cannot. And so what we typically see are some users who end up exchanging items out. So masks, they end up exchanging for ski masks. And goggles, they end up exchanging it with a sunglass because they see that there's added benefits. If I use a sunglass, I protect my eyes, and at the same time, it makes me more comfortable when I'm in the field. But clearly, the level of protection is very different. So that mental model that users use to determine which elements they can do without is sometimes not accurate. And so the line of exploration that's come from that is around whether or not we need to be able to design the PPE more as a kit, so an entire kit and every set is necessary, or do we want to still continue down the route of having different components and so that it's more flexible and a little bit more comfortable for the users as well. The jury is really still out there, so we are trialing different methods to see what might work better. The second finding maybe to highlight here is under the secondary barrier, the hassles that are involved in PPE. That's no surprise to anyone, but really it's about the continued utilization of the PPE. And so if we translate it to sort of a plantation operation, what we sometimes see is that, at the beginning of the day, the users are very compliant. They may put on everything. However, the minute it goes into a break time, or especially lunchtime, where the PPE has to be taken off, then that's where, and they need to put it on again in order to go back to the field. If there's continued operation, that's typically where the drop-off also happens. And it tends to drop off for the smaller elements like masks and goggles that usually get left out in the process. So these are the two highlights that maybe I'll share. And if anyone's interested in more details, then we can share a presentation that's been done by one of our colleagues, Delisa, on the behavioral insights findings on PPE use. But to summarize, we also agree on a lot of the redesign opportunities that were mentioned earlier. Temperature, comfort, climate, that's clearly one big consideration. So what materials can give them the right level of protection, but make them comfortable at the same time. The ease of use, so can they perform all of the functions required? Wearing gloves and opening bottles, for example, is quite a challenge. So these are just practical considerations. Washability and durability is the other key element in ease of use, but also around the social norms. It has to be a well-designed, professional-looking suit, and not something that people find funny wearing it. This is probably more a challenge for the open market farmers that we deal with, but we have seen that looking like a professional is one part of the soft element of actually encouraging people to use the PPE. And of course, the last element, you've seen some of the other HSE risks that Faisal has called out. So can we integrate all of these considerations so that there's no other additional PPE that's required to protect them from, say, falling branches, as an example. Yep. And then I'll just end off with this for anybody who's interested to really dive into the details. These are two sites that you can go into. The FAO site clearly is a lot more technical, very detailed. For those of you who just want a much higher level overview, then I recommend Pesticide-Wise. Adam, I'll end there, or back to you.
Thank you very much, Cindy. I think that, again, gives us another interesting perspective. And so we've had Dr. Astrid, we've had Faisal, and now your research gives us different perspectives to look. And yes, of course, there are many common comments made in each, but we're coming at it from different perspectives. So I think this is something we can now pick up in the panel discussion. So I would like to invite to the panel Caroline Lim, come back, who's Senior Manager, Corporate Communications of Musimas, Natasha Schwartzbach, Director Global Procurement Sustainability, PepsiCo, one of our great sponsors, and Jiong Xia Chong, co-founder M Design Solutions. SC will be helping run the design workshop during the Designathon. So he's coming in with his great design insights. So now that we're all here, we've heard quite a lot. So what I'd like to sort of get from this panel perhaps is starting with you, Caroline, and then I might move on to Natasha. The sense of, from your perspective, we've heard Cargill's perspective, in terms of, when you sort of put your hat on, what are the things that you're seeing through the lens of Musimas, and what's really important to you when looking at some of these challenges?
Right. That was the very insightful presentations from the speakers earlier. And for us at Musimas, is the top priority, as many have echoed. It's about the safe working environment, and that when we look at the PPE considerations, something of quality and comfortable for the users to use in the long term. When we look at the three main things stand out to us at Musimas. Firstly, it's about when we design stuff, it's about field work, right? People move about quite a bit in a hot and humid environment. Secondly, it is the tropics. So as my colleagues earlier has And the fact that we often find that many of the design reflect our own fears, whereas at Musimas, we try to look at the injury data at the clinics, and that we see that very often, for example, like they're not hit by bunches because FFB falls in a straight line because it's so heavy, whereas the fronds that are cut off with their thorns on the side do get cut some of the workers on the side. And these are some of the things. And over time, we want to encourage all here to look at what's most at risk when it comes to injuries, and therefore for the PPE to align to it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think in a sense that's also SC. I mean, it's coming back to kind of good old human-centered design, really looking at how the experience might be. But Natasha, giving the sort of PepsiCo view, I mean, you're not obviously just looking at Indonesia. You're facing these kinds of problems globally with different situations. Is there perhaps an additional perspective, or is there lots of similarities across the world when you look at these issues?
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. First of all, really great presentations. I think it's very good grounding to hear all of the challenges. But, from a PepsiCo perspective, when the Decent Rural Living Initiative presented us with this opportunity, we didn't hesitate to be a partner. And, that is because, as a company, we rely on farmers and farm workers, producing raw materials that are used in all of our products. And, we have, as a business, we have both an ethical and a responsibility to ensure that farmers and farm workers in our supply chain, are working in safe environments. And, we know that this PPE is, that they're all using widely. It's not available where it needs to be. It's not suitable to those humid conditions. And we hear firsthand from the farmers and from the workers, complaining about the heat and the discomfort and the lack of mobility, the weight of the materials, and other really practical issues. So, when from a PepsiCo perspective, we're really looking at this, to help us enable our, specific requirements and policies that we have that go much wider to the benefits of the contribution in communities and the environments in our supply chain. And so to your question, Adam, this for us is not just about palm oil in Indonesia. This is about the other crops and commodities that we buy that are located in the humid tropics and other countries as well. So, it goes beyond just palm oil in Indonesia. It goes for palm oil in Latin America, in Africa, for our other crops like potatoes, oats, corn, cane sugar. So for the participants on this call who are looking to be a part of this hackathon and this designathon, it is a remarkable opportunity to really look at how we can make that genuine difference to lives and the quality of life for hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah. And you make a really good point there, that the fact that it's across crops, it's across territories, because often when we're trying to drive change, it's about getting scale. And if we're just looking at one crop in one area, maybe that's not going to be enough. But to bring you into the call, SC, I mean, when you're looking at, design challenges like this, now, we've heard that it's about comfort and it's heard about temperatures. Now, those are not new facts, but clearly it's eluded us for some time to come up with a better solution. Are there particular design principles that you'd be, suggesting people think through when they're looking at these challenges? Is there something going back to first principles? How might they get around to cracking the nut, as it were?
Yeah, I think this is pretty challenging question that I haven't been approached.
Yeah, it's the $1 million question.
But I would like to cover the angle from actually this is a very interesting challenge in the sense that if you hear what all the presentation talking about, the list of all the issues that they need to solve. Probably it takes many years for really a solution to be able to solve all the problems, right? But on the other hand, I think what is interesting is also that.
Sorry, SC, just for a second.
Sure.
Your clarity is not so great. So
Is it okay?
That's better. If you wouldn't mind just holding.
Sure, I'll just hold
mic.
my mic and speak. So what I'm saying is actually, if you look at the number of issues that is being highlighted is tremendous. So if you try to solve all this, probably not realistic. But on the other hand, I think this is an interesting issue in the sense of the user for the solution. Probably they may not be the one that make the final decision to purchase. So in this particular case, it is a kind of B2B kind of situation for product that we're talking about. That means you're not making a product that the consumer is the one who makes the decision, right? So in that sense, there were many stakeholders. And in this case, in the normal circumstances, with many stakeholders, it's extremely challenging for designer to come up with an optimum solution that makes so many people happy, right? However, I think the big advantage for this collaboration in this particular case is because there are so many stakeholders now, the key one that is making the final decision to purchase and adopt are coming together with a common challenge and statement. And I would say that this is really absolutely a great opportunity, because then you get to have the economic of scale, then you get the chance of the awareness of the issue. And with this stakeholder that is fully aware of the issues, there's a great opportunity to look at how to elevate that solution to the next level. So those are the points that I would like to say, that from design point of view, should really look at various stakeholder needs, but at the end of it, that probably needs some prioritization, which is extremely important in this case. Yeah.
Well, I think also, and of course, as we heard with Cindy's presentation, the focus around human behavior, and we are talking about change management here and understanding how you tie human behavior in with the actual sort of the hardware of the equipment itself. I guess, some people would be scratching their heads and saying, but, guys, this has been a problem for a while. Is it scale that perhaps has stopped you, or has it been expense? Do we think perhaps we've just haven't tried some of the new technologies that are out there? I mean, we look at, we talk about astronauts, we talk about elite athletes, that people design equipment for them so that they can swim faster, run faster, whatever it might be. Is that we perhaps have not had the opportunity or the interest to apply those types of design skills or skill sets to such equipment? Anyone like to jump on that?
Well, I can take a stab at it. So, yeah, I mean, I think you need to look at sort of a bit about history as well, and how design has evolved over time. And certainly, we have seen farmers and farm workers try and develop their own PPE equipment. And, whilst it goes some way, it's not going to go the full way in terms of providing that real safety for them as what we need and what we require for to keep them healthy and safe in a working environment. So it's part of the evolution as we move forward. I think also, if you look at the time in which we're living in, 2 years ago, if you said PPE to a consumer, they wouldn't have any idea what you were talking about. So we need to put that into perspective and think about actually how can these designs really help to be part of that evolution to ensure that workers and farmers have accessibility to products and PPE that they want to be able to wear. They want to feel comfortable in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I just like to add that, for the palm sector, for me, 12 years in the sector, there's never a boring day. Every day we have big challenges. For the longest time, we are always tackling one issue to another. It was not until when we got together, the 5 of us in 2018, to systematically map out the labor challenges and then identify the focus areas. That's how we end up today with this Designathon, to then come up what is the nuance we can look at for PPE, and also for the fact that occupational health and safety has grown, the awareness for it has grown from the last few years, and that added to the urgency, and that's where we are today. That's why I would think that this is a great start. It's really about, if you see from how palm oil companies actually evolved to the microscopic level of wearing PPE, because for the longest time we were dealing with the macro issues like exploitation and abuse of workers. Then we ask ourselves, what does abuse look like, right? How do you differentiate the categories of be it PPE or be it management issues or human resource issues, etc. So yeah, here we are today. And testimony to the creativity and to appeal to all of you to then come up with something, because we have been inward looking for a very long time, and that the palm industry really need fresh ideas to the table. Yeah.
Nice. The right time.
And listen,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I think it's the right time, like what Caroline has mentioned. That's absolutely good.
Yeah, you're still just a little furry there, SC. I'm not sure what it is, but why don't you just adjust? Yeah, try again.
Sure. Is that better?
Yes, that's better. Your dulcet tones are coming through. But I think the point that you're all making, every problem has its time and the right time to sort of take it on. I was in something else this morning. We were talking about plant-based meat alternatives. Now, we've been eating vegetarian food for a long time. We've had plant-based for a long time. But all of a sudden now, with a focus around climate change and a whole bunch of other activities, it's really now a mega billion-dollar industry. And people are looking at it differently in the past. And I think also with this particular challenge, yes, people have looked at it in the past, but they've looked at it through particular lenses of that time. And as you point out, with everybody coming together, the right stakeholders are all saying, okay, let's get together, let's support this. We're not just looking at one crop. We're not just really looking at one geography. Major multinationals coming together. I think we have a great opportunity. And of course, there have been advances since the last time this might have been looked at, whether it's in materials science or other activities that can be brought to the fore to throw at this particular challenge. So I'm very excited to look at the submissions that we're going to be getting over the next 3 weeks. So I don't know, panelists, if you've got any last words you'd like to throw in to encourage our listeners and participants on the call?
Maybe I would like to give some encouragement, inspiration for the designer. I think this is a very clear situation where this is highly coming from demand side innovation. It means it's really a clear problem statement stated. Chances is that you'll be able to come up with a certain solution, but that solution probably may not be optimum enough that you're able to have a leap forward one step more than what is just a usual automation and refinement, right? So I think I would like to encourage the team to explain to you that I think the network of Padan and us, we have also strong network with technology people, material people. So that will be part of the help that we can offer to connect some of the, let's say, the updated technology, material, concept as well, that we are able to connect so that the designer, you will not be working alone. And actually, that's actually part of the reason for the Designathon, right? So that we are able to connect you with people with the data and also with technology and some other cross-fertilization possibility from other industry as well, right? Okay, back to you, Adam.
That's great. So, I mean, with that, I think I'll sort of slowly bring us to a close. But I think it is important, as he said there, that there are strong demand drivers. There's real challenge statements outlined. There's real demand from all the companies you've heard from today. And so we encourage you very much to put your designer hats on, and also to all of you on the call. You may not be the designer, but you know someone who is or is interested. So I'm going to flash up the slide at the moment. But thank you to the panelists, Natasha, Caroline, and SC, for participating. So this really is the last slide. Now, go to the website. You can, or take a snap of this, and the QR code will take you to the website, or take a photo so you've got it, or do both of them. But remember, 13 September, that's the date to remember for the time being to get your applications in. If you've got questions on the website, there's contacts. You can come to us. If you're not sure about anything, please come to us. We'll respond to everybody. We're here to help. You can see the resources and the commitment from sponsors like Cargill and PepsiCo, really interested to support what's being done here. So with that, I'd like to thank all our speakers this afternoon, Dr. Astrid, Faisal, Cindy, Natasha and Caroline, and SC for participating, and all of you on the call. The website will be updated with all the resources that we've heard from today. Qingping was putting some resources in the chat. All of these resources will also be on the website under the tab resources, which gives you a lot of background information on equipment, what it looks like. But as I say, we're here to help. Your ideas are the stars, but we're there and here to help you shape them and to be the best that they can. So again, thank you all very much. Thank you to Drilly, and have a good afternoon and good evening wherever you are. Thank you all for participating, and look forward to seeing your applications soon. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Someone doing a screen.